is the Tuesday, September 12th Planning Advisory Committee meeting for the Municipality of the County of Kings. I'm calling the meeting to order, and we'll do roll call if Loriana's ready. There we go. We have regrets from a citizen member, Ms. Friars, and Councillor Killam is out on a medical leave, so we're up and ready to go. We have an agenda before us. Are there any amendments to the agenda from any of the members or from staff? Nope, good. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Allen, Mr. Morse, thank you. And if there's no changes, then you can register your vote now. Once we have an approved agenda, I'll ask any members to, if they have any disclosure of conflict of interest issues on any of the items before us today. And if there's none, then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from August 8th, 2023. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to read those over. If there's no errors or omissions, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Ms. Gagnon? Councillor Granger? Thank you. You can register your vote now. Oh. Great. And if is there any business arising from the minutes from any of the members? Nope. Great. So our first item of business today is a presentation from Darren Shoup from Brighter Communities Planning and Consulting on the issue of inclusionary zoning and density bonusing. So I'll turn the mic over to you. Hang on, you're not on yet.
Okay.
There you go.
I got the red light. Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darren Shoup, Senior Planner with Brighter Community Planning. It's been about a year now, I think, that we started into our project with Kings, looking at two areas of policy that are enabled through the Municipal Government Act and potential tools for the municipality to look at going forward. And kind of the original framework for this was looking at ways to facilitate affordable housing in the municipality, as well as looking at some of the aspects of these policies that can help build communities at the same time. So recognizing that the report itself that we completed was fairly significant piece of work, and staff report as well, we made an effort to keep this as to the point as possible, so this introduction shouldn't go on too long. And we'll launch right into looking at some of the key concepts that went into the paper, the report, and then step right into some of the policy considerations and finally recommendations. So the project itself has started approximately this time, a little bit later in October last year, and have the four stages of our work listed on the screen here from where we started in the research phase, looking at existing King's documents, the planning strategies, different policies, land use bylaw. We had an opportunity to speak with key informants, both PAC members and other key members of the community. And at that initial stage, we were able to pull enough together to look at a comparative policy analysis, so looking at what other municipalities are doing as well with these policies, and tried to focus on Nova Scotia as much as possible, expanded it out through Canada and a little bit. For the second kind of phase of this project, we had an opportunity to speak with some of the private sector development community members, as well as community groups who deal directly in the areas of affordable housing or housing development to get their thoughts on what they see as key considerations for development. And apologies for folks on the right here. I will try to sit up taller so we make eye contact during this presentation. So we had an opportunity to meet with them and sort of synthesize some of their thoughts, which helped inform the outcome. Taking all these first two pieces together, we put together a discussion paper, which we finished up earlier this year, and that allowed us to then engage in some of the policy amendments and proposed amendments that we're looking at today through an active discussion with staff to make sure that we were shaping this appropriately for Kings, or getting it going in a good direction, and that's what we have before you today. So I'm just going to touch on quickly the actual policy statements that are in the Municipal Government Act. I'll try not to do too much reading of slides. There'll be a little bit, but you've all had an opportunity to look at the report, so it's all there, and I'm just going to hit the highlights again. So, but there are some key terms in here, and some of it can be confusing sometimes. Even the way it's written can be a little bit challenging. For example, for the first statement, as incentive or bonus zoning means requirements that permit the relaxation of certain requirements if an applicant receives other requirements or undertakes other action in the public interest as specified in the requirements. So for the lack of a thesaurus, they threw a lot of requirements at us. The second piece is basically a bit of enabling, where the municipal planning strategy provides the land use bylaw can regulate based on that. So as more of a concrete example of what all those requirements we're talking about, it's an example of height bonus policy. For example, if you were to imagine what provisions might be made to allow for an extra story, for example, for a building. So the establishes a new requirement in this case would mean the provision of a public benefit. So it'd be a public bonus that goes into that, and we'll talk about that at the bottom of this. That would permit the relaxation of certain requirements, and the requirements in this case would be the maximum building height. So the requirements within the land use bylaw, and that would be perceived as a developer bonus. And much of what we're talking about here is a trade-off between public and developer bonuses. Hopefully, they're going in the right direction, and they're going in a similar direction where everyone benefits from this potential new direction. But that's sort of the trade-off that happens as we go through. We'll see it a bit more. So if an applicant exceeds other requirements, so if the developer were to provide that public benefit, and as specified in the requirements, which is where the definition of what those public benefits would be. So I apologize, this is a bit confusing perhaps language, but to look at what those public benefits may be, and here's another example where for a height bonus, if the developer would be permitted to get that extra level, extra story, they would be required then to provide either affordable housing, public art, make their building a high performance building in terms of some of those accreditations, energy efficiency. Also enhanced accessibility certification could be one of the things that they would be asked to do, or the cash in lieu avenue to put into various municipal programs. So inclusionary zoning is a different section of the MGA, and there's two sections in there. The municipality may actually provide direct financial assistance for the purpose of increasing availability of affordable housing. And secondly, the municipality, through the municipal planning strategy, may require and regulate the provision of affordable housing within developments, including requiring a certain percentage of affordable housing units to be provided within that development. So this one is a little bit newer in the province. And just to perhaps explain the concept of inclusionary, when we're thinking of inclusionary zoning, it's to have more than just a single demographic able to access that type of housing, for example. sometimes a development is set at a price point that may exclude people from participating, from making that an option, a housing option for them. So it's providing different types of housing options and including more of the population in a potential development is basically what that is aiming at. So one of the things that we looked at, and one of the another consulting group, the Hemson Consulting Group, was engaged in New Brunswick and Ontario, as well as looking at some different predictors for inclusionary zoning. So we have the 4 predictors listed here, and something that we examined in the King's context as well. So it's the 4 are consistent supply of new housing and growth, so that we see a consistent pattern of development, patterns of intensification, also land value and market strength, and housing need in the middle income group. So that without reading these out in full, those are sort of the 4 factors that we kind of had a look at when we were thinking of the King's context. And we'll come back to that again in a little bit. So on the economic side, inclusionary zoning is probably more of a, let's say, a hands-on approach from municipality, and it actually introduces, and we'll see this in the next slide, how municipal policy affects the housing market through, or can affect the housing market through inclusionary zoning. And one of the things that the developers brought up during our session was the risk of potentially disincentivizing development if we don't tweak the policy adequately. And I also add that it's pretty obvious that the housing market has been in quite a state of flux over the last few years. Just in some of the macro level, it's everything through COVID, through different levels of the current inflationary processes that are going on. Interest rates all affect how housing is developed, and for a municipality to take on inclusionary zoning, there has to be quite a bit of data to support that. We'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But on this slide, we're looking at primarily the relationship between land value and the potential revenue, which can be affected by zoning. And on basically the 2 left-hand columns there look at sort of a typical development outside of inclusionary zoning practice, and the relationships between the revenue generated, and on the right, the impact of inclusionary zoning, which can have an effect on the land value. And as we'll see in the slide, which looks at, it's a Venn diagram way of sort of setting up the ideal situation for development, and it speaks of the relationship, as I just mentioned, between land, public policy, the market, and the ability for the developer to obtain the capital to invest in their developments. So this goes a little bit deeper into the development economics than many municipalities have been engaged with. And again, this may speak to some of the enabling aspects of what we're looking to do later on. Rather than to launch into a full program on this, it'd be more of a measured approach, and particularly looking for greater data sets to help support this level of policy development. So that's a lot of theory on inclusionary zoning. A more concrete example here is from the city of Richmond. Recognize a different scale than what Kings County experiences in terms of housing. But in Richmond, they have required developments with more than 60 units to provide a certain number of built units that are of the affordable nature. Developments with less than 60 units are required to contribute a cash in lieu to receive their density bonus. And then for smaller scale developments, there's also some provisions in there to have them contribute towards this as well. And for Richmond, this has been a program that started in 2007, but has resulted in more than 1,000 new affordable units. I think that'll be in a city of 250,000 people. So just to put the context in. So a common question that comes out, sort of based on that last slide, but in a general talk on affordable housing, is how the definition and how it should be applied for a municipality. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's classic definition is housing considered affordable if it costs less than 30% of a household's before-tax income. There are different factors that could be considered for Kings to develop their own definition, and some of those could be, it's not something that we entered into here, but it should be mentioned that the suitability, adequacy, and affordability, they're all different ways of breaking that idea of affordability down to look at different groups and how it affects different groups and who's most at risk, potentially for housing insecurity. So that's a nuance that could be developed later as these policies are potentially engaged. And I know we had some language in the report and the staff report as well on below market housing. So based on the continuum at the bottom there, it's not exactly representational. Market housing probably represents 90% of all development, but the below market housing is something that probably it's in an acute state across the province, and due to lack of investment from various levels of government over the years, and that's another question that I won't get into today, is ultimate responsibility for housing, but it's certainly something that we thought about as we're putting the report together. So a few other key concepts when we're looking at density within Kings. Municipal planning strategy concentrates growth and density in growth centers, so that's the focus of our attention for these proposed policy changes. We're focused on growth centers. A few other terms that come up is the idea of gentle density, and some of your recent work on accessory dwelling units and group dwellings within the residential 2-unit zone sort of speak to that aspect of gentle density. Also missing middle, that's another term that gets more traction lately. And that sort of philosophy is captured within the mixed density residential zone, where you're looking for the transition basically from the R1 and R2 zones into something a little bit denser, but still at the same time appropriate within the community where it's based. So that last idea and last point here, all neighborhoods are able to contribute appropriate levels of housing growth. That's something, sort of a value that we kind of carry through with the policy proposal as well. And I referred to before, there's been a lack of data. The housing needs assessment that the province is currently conducting, and I understand is expected by later this year, will help fill some of that gap. But again, data is as good as, or I guess it's as valuable as its currency. So it goes stale quickly, and there's an ongoing effort that would need to be made to ensure that you're continuing to receive good data to help direct policy. And some of it's particularly in the inclusionary zoning, where I'd say there's more of a market aspect involved with it. And let's make sure I got everything here. So that concludes the background, the conceptual pieces of our reporting, and try to bridge into the next section. Why did we take the approach with the proposals that we did? So between Ryder and King's staff, we had a look at a wide range of policy options, fleshing out a little bit of the bonus zoning, inclusionary zoning, just to try to see if that's something that could be brought forward. There's also the revising of as of right regulations as well. And we're also conscious of, again, by taking more of a direct municipal role in housing, what that means in terms of staff capacity and whether it's the right timing to do that with the development community as well. So overall, what we're doing here is recommending what's basically an incremental approach by permitting appropriate density at the lower end of the density scale, while enabling future policies and programs for bonus and inclusionary zoning if the data supports the development. So I think it's all hinges on the availability of data and sufficiency of data to carry forward. So the next section can step through each of the proposed amendments. Again, there is some wall of text effect here, and I won't be reading everything, but just to quickly touch on everything, and it can be a reference if there's any questions later as well on these particular sections. With the proposed amendment for the mixed density residential R3 zone, what we've done here is basically we've removed the reference to an 8-unit maximum and left that open for now. Again, and then reflected in the land use bylaw for the same zone for R3, there was a reference to the 8-unit maximum for there as well. And to demonstrate what we're looking at here, this is in the permitted uses section. So those two rows, we've had that change from a maximum of 8 to a maximum of 12. I will note that the other zone requirements still apply. So heights, setbacks, they will all remain the same as proposed. In the residential multi-unit zone, in this case, we removed, there's a 16-unit maximum reference in there that we have removed. And again, here it reflects in these two rows for multi-unit dwellings for townhouses, where we removed the as-of-right maximum 16 units. Again, the height requirements, setbacks all remain in place for these. So to a certain extent, it depends, lot size will depend, will be the determinant of how it can be developed, but the other regulations would still be in effect. For the mixed commercial residential, this again reflects back to removing the 16 unit residential units per dwelling to keep it in line with what's happening in the R4 zone, so that they're speaking the same language. And these are some of the new sections that we're proposing. No, sorry, we're not quite there yet. This is on the high density residential development section of the MPS, where there was language regarding mini home park development, which has been revised, actually deleted. And that section, the highlight section B that's been pulled out there as well, is that just to demonstrate what the current wording is with regards to mini home park or high density development. And that section has been removed where it does not allow it through low density neighborhoods as well. So that part has been taken out. Now here are their new sections, as I just mentioned. So we have a brand new preamble that speaks to the affordable housing and community benefit incentive policies. The new reference is put in here for the bonus and inclusionary zoning sections that briefly went over earlier, and it includes a series of the 8 Fs there in 3.1.17 for new affordable housing initiatives that the municipality can look to engage in. Another new section specifically on bonus zoning. So it speaks to the development of a community contributions bylaw that would help regulate the bonus zoning and set standards for it. And for the inclusionary zoning, this is a new section as well. And it reflects the need to establish a new bylaw to shape any inclusionary zoning program that could be entered into by the municipality. So in summary, proposed amendments include in the R3 zone, increasing the maximum units from 8 to 12, maximum units per dwelling. For the R4 and C3 zones, removing the 16-unit maximum units per dwelling threshold. For various sections there, removing references to the mini home park development. Adding affordable housing policies is another section that we're proposing. Enabling the development of a bonus zoning bylaw, and also enabling the development of an inclusionary zoning bylaw. So I don't know do I want to flash this one yet, or do we want to, through the chair, if it's, that ends my presentation at least, so if I could turn it back over.
Thank you. Questions from the committee of the presenter? Ms. Gagnon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I couldn't remember which button to press. Just so I can be clear, please, C3 and C4 zone, the residential, that's, or R3, R4, sorry, removing 16 maximum units. Will there be a 20 maximum unit, a 32 maximum unit? It's just like no unlimited units. Is there a max that are going to be put or no?
They're going to double team this.
Okay.
This motion.
I'll fill in if Darren leaves me any gaps.
Go ahead. Oh. You go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me see if I can get back to this.
Yeah, I like that one there.
Okay.
That is C3.
So I think the question, and this applies, to both this and the R4 zone, on removing the 16 and whether or not there's any bounds going forward in terms of development. Again, the regulations in the land use bylaws still remain for all, in terms of, and I don't have that in front of me to pull up the what remains question. So I mean, there is regulation in the sense that there are still setbacks, there's still a height limit. Maybe I will look to Laura to help backfill here a little bit, if I may.
Sure. So the land use bylaw requires a certain amount of lot area for each unit. So that's how we sort of deal with the density in all of our residential zones, but particularly in the zones that permit higher density built forms, so things like townhouses, apartment buildings. We require that you have a certain amount of lot area to accommodate those units. So in the R3 zone, it's the same as in the R1 and R2. You require 2,000 square feet of lot area for each residential unit. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, then you get 5 units maximum. Okay. So the limitation is through the lot area, not through the total number of units that can be contained in any one building.
So why then are all these references to maximum number of units per dwelling?
Because currently we do only permit a maximum number of units in a multi-unit dwelling in the R3 and R4 zones.
Okay, so even if you had the lot space for like 20 units, the requirement is maximum 8, and so it would stop at 8. But now we wouldn't.
Yes, that's correct. So if you had a 200,000 square foot lot, in theory you get 100 units, but they have to be in buildings that contain a maximum of 8 or 16 units, depending on the zone. So you could have multiple buildings, but you can still only have a given number of units per building.
Okay, so this in effect is increasing that number of units per building.
Or removing the limitation altogether, depending on the zone, correct.
Okay, and thank you. And the second question was regarding the bonus. So the way I understand the bonus zoning is that it would be, for example, if you want to increase in height, and that's not, there's a maximum height level. So what I've heard from representation is the heights and the setbacks stay the same. But if you implement the bonus zoning and someone says, okay, we want to, then the height could change even after we've changed. So from 8 to 12 units per dwelling, but then they could also apply for a bonus on top of that as of right change that is occurring. Is that correct? Do you need me to re-explain? I'm not always good at my questions.
I'll do my best. So my understanding, and it would depend on how the program is shaped. It could be formed in various ways. If bonus zoning, I'll probably need some help on this one, but because I'm stepping too far out. But on top of your existing zoning, you can have an overlay as well for different types of areas that would be appropriate for bonus zoning. They could be. Again, I'm really stepping out here, but it could be community-based. There are different community considerations where different densities could be considered. It could be through, and I don't want to say a development agreement, but it could be through that process as well, where if there's servicing questions that come up through the proposed development, it may not be appropriate to have X number of units where there's no servicing for it, or there's no services beyond pipe service. There may be other things that may not be in the area that support that kind of development. Lord, would you care to add some color to that?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, I think you've captured the theory behind it. I think Darren is absolutely right in that the devil is in the details, as always. I know I say that a lot in this committee, but we don't have the program designed as yet. What we do need in order to design a program is policy direction. So what we're trying to do today is to set up the policy direction within the municipal planning strategy, and the implementation could potentially come later, but we don't know the details of the implementation yet because we're just looking to set it up in policy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? So what we're going to do today, the recommendation is just to accept this information. Okay. Where'd the recommendation go? Approve public. Approve a public. So we're going to approve a public participation meeting to receive feedback on these draft policies. Okay. Yeah. The only thing I'd say about it is I have a problem with the and or, you know, it would be either they would be required to do affordable housing or they would be required to do cash in lieu of. And I think that I'm afraid that affordable housing developers may find that as too much work, especially when you're dealing with the 30% of your income before tax. That changes for everyone. You know, my income before tax may be different from theirs, and therefore each individual person that's looking at moving into these affordable housing units would have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. That's a lot of work for a developer to determine that. And they may just say, rather than do that, I'll just give you money and then I can, you can use it in whatever way you see fit. And that sort of defeats the purpose of affordable housing. So I have a bit of a problem with that. I think that if you're going to regulate, some things it will be affordable housing or it will be in lieu of, especially when you're getting into growth centers where the affordable housing is so important, when you have the public transit there and you have shopping there and things like that. So that being said, I don't have a problem with moving it forward into a public participation meeting, which is what this recommendation is. So if I have, Mr. Vorek?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to be sure that the committee was clear on what we're doing and what we're hoping to do with the motion and going to the public. To the chair's point, we have all those same concerns, so this is just setting up the policy so that in future, if council chooses, a separate document would be created to deal with all of these issues in the future. We're not doing any of that groundwork right now. The only groundwork we're doing is setting up policy to enable future work. So those details are in the future, just in terms of what it is that we're going to the public. It's just the policy setup.
Yep.
Okay.
Ms. Gagnon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I follow up on that and just ask, what are the next steps after a public participation meeting in this case, given that it's not our normal thing?
That's you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we do have a proposed date to put to the committee for consideration for the PPM. So if you recall, those are meetings that this committee hosts to get that feedback, and then we'll bring that back to this committee once we hear from the public to discuss again. That will be our next step, because we're amending the MPS, so that's what's triggering this extra meeting. And then it would go through the normal process after that.
Okay, so after the public participation meeting and staff have you reviewed, they will submit to this committee again a more detailed on the actual changes in the wording of the MPS that we'll have to read and comment on.
They've been included today, everything that we'll be bringing forward, unless there's something that comes up during the public participation meeting that this committee wants to address or feels wasn't covered adequately along that lines. But right now you have everything we're proposing. So the changes to the MPS and ultimately the changes to the land use bylaw, which specifically are the 3 zones, so the R3, the R4, and the C3 zones, the proposed changes that we're wanting to bring out to the public. That would all be part of that public participation meeting.
That's in Appendix B, right? That's the
That's appendix, yes.
Okay, and just to clarify, Madam Chair, again, for public participation meetings, we don't comment on those when they're held, right? The public comments, but we don't. So, no. Okay.
We're learning from them. That's right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So the motion before us is that the Planning Advisory Committee approve a public participation meeting to receive both stakeholder and public feedback on the draft development policies in Appendix B. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Granger? Jeez. And Councillor Davison? All right, thank you. If there's no debate, then you can register your vote now, please. And that's passed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shoup. I'm assuming we'll see you again. Okay, the next item that we have before us is an application to rezone a portion of the property on Highway 1 in Lockhartville, and that file belongs to Ms. Ullman. And your mic is on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a land use bylaw map amendment, a rezoning application for Highway 1 in Lockhartville. The property ID number is 55227730. So the background and proposal, this is to rezone from the rural mixed-use A2 zone to the rural commercial C4 zone. So Thomas Bland has applied for a land use bylaw map amendment to rezone 0.9 acres of his 19-acre property along Highway 1 in Lockhartville from the rural mixed use A2 zone to the rural commercial C4 zone. Mr. Bland would like to use this 0.9 acres to start a small electric vehicle repair and conversion business. The applicant is proposing a 40 by 60 foot building within the 9-acre area being proposed for rezoning. Mr. Bland acquired the property in January of 2023 with the intent to use it for a business idea for electric vehicles. In February 2023, Mr. Bland applied to have a portion of the land rezoned from the A2 rural mixed-use zone to the rural commercial C4 zone. This would permit small-scale electric vehicle repair business. So this is the approximate location of the application. There is currently no civic address for this property, but it is located on Highway 1 in Lockhartville in close proximity to the Ben Jackson connector. So this is an aerial view of the property, and as you can see, the small portion in the corner is the area that is being proposed for the rezoning. So the subject property has a total lot area of 19 acres. The applicant is proposing to rezone 0.9. The subject property has a total frontage of 966 feet, and the area to be rezoned has an approximate lot frontage of 220 feet along Lockhartville Road. The area of the proposed rezoning is 39,204 square feet. So Highway 101 abuts the property along the rear or southwest property line, and there is no direct access to Highway 101 from the subject property. The closest highway connection would be the Ben Jackson connector, which is located just east of the subject property. The subject property is currently vacant, and the site is currently overgrown, densely treed, very rocky, and is characterized by a lot of uneven ground. The subject property has not had agricultural activity on it in recent memory, and the southwest portion of the property closest to the highway is low-lying and retains water. So this reduces the usability of this area of the property. The property does slope downwards away from Highway 1 towards Highway 101. So this is the future land use map. As you can see, the property is within the agricultural designation, and the rural commercial C4 zoning is permitted within this designation. So right now, the subject property is zoned rural mixed use. As you can see, it is surrounded by other properties that are also zoned rural mixed use. And then across the highway, there is the resource N1 zone, and then the rural commercial zone and highway commercial C5 zone. Located within the rural commercial, there's a small cluster of commercial businesses, and adjacent to that, where the rural commercial zone is, the C5 zoning in this area, that's where the Gloosclap Landing is. So there is, in close proximity to this parcel, already established commercial businesses. So these are site photos. So the first site photo is looking towards the side of the property, and as you can see, it is very densely vegetated. And then this is the proposed access along Highway 1. As you can see, the property does slope down towards the interior of the property. So for the policy review and enabling policies, 5.3.3 of the municipal planning strategy, council shall consider amendments to any of the zoning maps in the land use bylaw, provided the application is for a specific development and is to rezone land to another zone enabled within the same designation, unless the zone change is specifically prohibited within this strategy. This application concerns the proposed rezoning of land from the current rural mixed-use A2 zone to the rural commercial C4 zone. Section 5.3, development agreements and amending the land use bylaw, enables council to consider this application as it is enabled within the commercial designation. It is enabled within the agricultural designation. The subject property is also less than 5 acres and is adjacent to other commercial designations. The subject property is located within the agricultural designation, and on this basis, council is able to consider rezoning a portion of this property from rural mixed use to the rural commercial zone, since the rural commercial zone is enabled within the agricultural designation in policy 3.4.3 of the municipal planning strategy. So for section 5.3.5 of the municipal planning strategy, council shall consider in relation to all applications to rezone land the applicable zone placement policies, including any specific policy criteria for applying the proposed zone set out within this strategy, and the impact of both the specific development proposal and other possible uses permitted in the proposed zone. This proposed rezoning is consistent with the zone intent and placement, which is reviewed in the following slides. The impact of the proposed rural commercial rezoning is considered compatible with the surrounding cluster of commercial zoning in a rural area. 2.2.2, establish and enable the following rural zones, common to the agriculture and resource designations in the land use bylaw. A, rural commercial, land zoned for commercial uses serving rural industries, visitors, and residents to locate and expand in rural communities. The contextual text provided in this section acknowledges that this zone has not been applied broadly, but rather to existing rural commercial uses. Due to the unpredictability of demand for the development of rural commercial uses, it was council's intent to entertain applications for rezoning to this zone as demand occurs. Having businesses providing repair services locally enables these uses to be located close to where rural residents live. It is also generally accepted that automobile-oriented uses do not significantly contribute to vibrant public spaces within urban cores. So having these uses located in rural areas enables more appropriate uses to locate within urban commercial areas. The added service proposed by this proponent, namely the conversion of cars having internal combustion engines to electric engines, is a novel service that may draw clients from further away. It is staff's opinion that the proposal meets the zone placement policies for this zone. So 2.2.11, consider proposals to rezone lands within the agricultural designation or resource designation from any other zone except lands within the agricultural A1 zone to the rural commercial C4 zone. In evaluating such proposals, council shall be satisfied that the proposal A limits the rezoning area to the size reasonably required to accommodate the proposal, including any proposed phasing. And B, meets any specific rezoning criteria in the designation applicable to the lot. For the agricultural designation, the criteria are in section 3.4, and C meets the general criteria for amending land use bylaw set out in section 5.3, development agreements and amending the land use bylaw. The placement of the zones within a designation is intended to control the location of different land uses. The zone placements reflect the policy intent for each zone and the development pattern of communities at the time the zones were applied. So section 3.4.23, consider rezoning from agricultural A2 to rural industrial or rural commercial, and in considering such amendments, council shall be satisfied that A, the application only applies to land that has not been in recent agricultural production as determined through a review of diverse information, including but not limited to the land cover map, aerial photography, assessment information, local knowledge, or any other relevant sources. B, that the proposal would not rezone more land than required for the specific proposal cited in the application, and will not create undue conflict with nearby agricultural uses or rural residents. And D, it meets the land use bylaw amendment criteria set out in section 5.3, development agreements and amendments to the land use bylaw. The subject property is not shown to have been in agricultural production in 2012. A review of aerial photography indicated that the property has not been in agricultural production in recent years. The proposal seeks to rezone 0.9 acres of land, which is a reasonable amount of land to support the proposed 2,400 square foot building and associated infrastructure, which would include well and septic. With regard to impacts on nearby agricultural uses or residents, the subject property does not abut active agricultural lands, and staff do not expect there to be undue negative impacts on neighboring farm operations or residents. General rezoning criteria are reviewed in the next slide. So for the general criteria, Section 5.3 of the Municipal Planning Strategy contain a number of general criteria for applications for a map amendment to the applicable land use bylaws. These criteria are considered and the impact of the proposal on the road network, service, development pattern, environment, finances, well fields, as well as the proposal's consistency with the intent of the planning strategy. So we looked at this application, and in terms of the general criteria, the proposal is in keeping with the municipal planning strategy. There would be no financial impact on the municipality. There would be feasibility for on-site services. There is land use compatibility. There are no well fields in this area, and the site suitability is appropriate. So the land use bylaw map amendment process, we received a completed application and properties within 500 feet were notified. There was not a public information meeting for this application because the size of the area being proposed to be rezoned is less than 1 acre in size. So staff reviewed this, and now here we are at the Planning Advisory Committee. So 14 properties were notified, and we received questions from 2 people, but they were more general, and we did not hear any concerns or opposition on this proposal. So property owners within 500 feet will be notified again should this make it to public hearing, and the hearing will be advertised in the local newspaper. Staff are recommending the following motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering if the applicant wishes to expand again, does this whole process start again, or does it become an amendment?
Oops, okay.
Through you, Madam Chair. So where this is a land use bylaw map amendment, if he needed more space, he would have to come back for another amendment, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gagnon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to clarify about the water and wetlands and just to determine, so if you can possibly bring back the slide of the aerial photo of the site so that I'm understanding the, yes, there. There you go. Okay, so the land slants, I'm like you today, slants toward Highway 1. So in that direction. Okay, and you mentioned in the description that there's a section of property where water pools. So that would be towards Highway 101, towards the rotary there, in that section?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Gagnon, just to clarify, there are no wetlands in this area. It's just where, if we get excessive amount of rain, where water does sit. So it makes the usability of that portion of the lot challenging.
Okay, and that's the furthest from where the site is being rezoned.
Right, along Highway 101.
Okay. The reason is just my concern at giving that it would be a mechanics. I mean, repairs of car at the end of the day is mechanics, and if it's conversion of oil or fossil fuel cars to electrical cars, there'll be fluids, there'll be oil, there'll be, so it's not just the lithium batteries, which the fire in the report was covered by the fire department, so that's great. But also just the site itself would end up having those same type of issues that a mechanic shop would have. So I'm assuming the rezoning, since it permits it, would there's also requirements behind that for making sure that, and none of those fluids would flow into where the water would go. So that was just my concern that I was trying to figure out because of the criteria there for wetlands and for water quality and neighboring properties, but seeing as it I'm assuming the developer would put all the regulations in to make sure it doesn't happen, but if there are fluids that would flow with rainwater, heavy rainfall, which is to be expected from now on for decades to come, that it's going to go towards the highway and not towards the neighbors. So that was the reason for the map. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? Can I have the recommendation back, please? So the recommendation, or the motion before us is the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Municipal Council give first reading to and hold a public hearing regarding the application to rezone portion of a vacant parcel of land, PID 55227730, located on Highway 1 in proximity to the Ben Jackson Connector, Lockhartville, from the rural mixed-use A2 zone to the rural commercial C4 zone as described in Appendix C of the report dated September 12, 2023. Do I have a mover? Councillor Allen. Mr. Morris, thank you. I'm having a heck of a time. So is there any debate? Nothing? Okay. So I'll call the question then, and you can register your vote now. And that is passed. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ullman. The next on our agenda is any other business. Is there any other business to be brought forward by the members of the committee? Nothing? At this point on our agenda, it's open for public comments. So if anyone would like to come forward to the podium and speak, they're more than welcome to. We just need you to give us your name and address before you begin speaking. Nothing? Thank you. So other than that, the date of our next meeting is October 10, 2023, 1 p.m. in these chambers. And if that's all for today, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Gagnon, Mr. Morris, thank you. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.